All right. I've shot a couple ideas for episodes of my personal content. By the way, if you haven't seen my last episode from Prison to Peace with Mark Miner, I would recommend that episode. Talk about a story. I've recorded two different ideas, and it doesn't feel right. Different things didn't gel, and so I ate horribly last night. It's one of my issues. I don't eat sweets a lot, but if I do late at night, the addictive nature takes over, and I've eaten 9 coffee cakes and woke up this morning wanting to die and freezing working, and but then things started to kind of materialize to what I wanted to talk about. This is a subject I wanted to talk about for a long time. I was talking with one of my friends a while back and asking her, we were just kind of doing some psychoanalyzing of, different people and different things. And me kind of guessing what I think different people's weaknesses would be. And I asked her, what do you think my weakness is? And, she thought about it for a minute. And then her eyes lit up and she said, pride. Well, she got it. I've lived in 7 states, and I'm from Utah, and I love Utah. And the title of this is not to bash on Utah. There's so many things I like about it. I don't like the cold. If you like the cold, I don't like you. Well, I do like you, but maybe not quite as much. But it is the most competitive state I've ever seen. C.S. Lewis said something very interesting about pride. He said, pride is competitive in nature. Pride gets no joy in having something, only in having more than someone else. Remove the element of pride or of competition, and pride disappears. Now, I'm paraphrasing that, and of course that's one element of pride. There's a lot of elements, but I want to talk about comparison. And comparison is said to be the thief of joy, and it truly is. I've talked about in my early episode, in my introduction, what started me on this path. When I got divorced, I went on a Lake Powell trip, and I was with a bunch of beautiful women in a boat, bikinis, and pumping rap music, and felt like I was in an MTV music video, and was thinking 5 years ago I didn't see myself here, but I'm glad I am. And I started posting these things on Facebook, and I started getting messages from people that were wanting to get divorced, and I was asking why, and it was because of my Facebook. Because of this perception of what my life was like based upon what I chose to share with people at the time. And my intent was not to do that, but God hit me very strongly. You have to own your reality. And for you, one of your missions is to give people an accurate picture, because comparison is fundamentally inaccurate. Because we never really know what people are going through. And most people aren't going to do what I'm doing. Most people aren't going to tell you everything. They only want you to see what they want you to see. And I'm not saying that's not necessarily bad, but typically that's rooted in a belief of, well, not everyone's meant to share everything, but it's rooted a lot in belief. If people knew the deep down secrets or stuff, I would be unlovable, which is sad, right? But we don't know what's going on with people in their life, but our brains can certainly tell us what's going on, right? The world has an interesting definition of, what success is. And to me, it typically is 2 things that I see: possessions and honor, right? The honor of man, being esteemed, being looked up to. And, I know a ton of podcasts. I know some local ones where the whole basis seems to be accumulate possessions, own land, do all these things, and people will like you. At this point with me, the acclamation of wealth is not that impressive to me. to an extent if it's done honorably, but I know a ton of people that have made a fortune off of lies or deceit, and then it's really not impressive. Someone that can handle wealth and still remain humble, someone that can show me how a rich man can go through an eye of a needle and make it into heaven, that's incredible to me. That was always my struggle when I got money. I didn't need God, and I stopped being consistent, and I couldn't handle success, and it's still something I'm trying to do. But in our scriptures within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in the Doctrine and Covenants, Christ is talking, and it's very interesting. He talks about the difference or the distinction between being called and chosen. And he says, many are called, but few are chosen. And why are they not chosen? Because their hearts are set so much upon the things of this world and aspire to the honors of man that they do not learn this one lesson, that the rights of priesthood cannot be controlled nor handled only on principles of righteousness. Well, the priesthood is the power to act in God's name, but it's basically saying a lot of people are called, but people get caught up. They get caught up in the things of this world and the honors of men. For me, I think everyone likes things. They like to have things, right? Possessions. But I think the honors of man is a little more sexy, usually. We get these nice things, and I'll talk about me. I've certainly done it. In some ways, I still do it. We want people to see that, right? I have, I know a lot of people that are sharing their stories, and they share a rags to riches story, which can be exciting, but then they say they're talking about vulnerability. Well, I don't see any vulnerability if it's just, I went from the trenches and now I'm wonderful and successful. Vulnerability by definition is putting yourself at risk, sharing things, that may potentially hurt you. And in the case of heroic vulnerability, it's doing so at that expense with the hope of helping someone, right? But this idea that, hey, in order to be admired, in order to be loved, you have to have possessions, right? You have to have these things, right? If you do, people will respect and like you. Well, it's interesting, wealthy people, and I know some, but just in general, you look at people that, for instance, that are wonderful at sports, that maybe were raised and didn't have a lot of money. Well, they tend to keep their inner circle and when they make a lot of money. Why? Because those are the people that care about them, right? Not all the time, but a lot of the time. But once you start getting a lot of money, you have to start second guessing people's motives. I think of Justin Bieber, and I always was sympathetic to him. I remember they did a change.org petition years ago, this kid to deport him. And, for me, I'm looking at this young kid who just became rich overnight. And I can't imagine how hard that was and how sad that was for him, right? And he has a single that he put out called Lonely, which truly is heartbreaking. A beautiful song. And, from what I've seen, I think, in my opinion, he's acquitted himself pretty well with it. But our problem is, we get caught up in these things and think it's where our value is. I had an experience a while back that was crazy, fascinating, funny, everything all in one. I went to this concert and I didn't know the band, or I didn't know the headliner or the opening band, right? But this opening band, their lead singer, he looked a lot like me. And he had a very passionate fan base. It was a Christian rock band. So I personally didn't love the music, so I'm with my buddies, and they just happened to both be dressed in black. Logan and Gabe, they happen to be very muscular, good-looking guys as well. So, we go outside, and I'm sitting there, and this girl walks by, and she just starts to scream. And I'm looking at me, and then her boyfriend says, no, that's not him. that's not the lead singer of the band. And, I think I said it, hey, your boyfriend's better looking than me or the lead singer, so you should be happy. And, she smiled. And so we went back in the concert, and I actually have videos of some of this stuff because it was funny and fascinating, and my buddies were recording it. So I go back in there, and the band's playing, and I start looking around, and there's like 200 or 300 people just staring at me. And normally I wouldn't do this, but some in me just told me just to go with it, right? So people start coming up and they're just starstruck and they're asking for pictures, right? And I don't think I ever said I'm the guy, right? But I certainly acted like him. But I just felt like, hey, they love this guy. I don't know what type of guy this guy is, but bring them down to a human level. And it was interesting. I just tried to respond, hey, we're both just people out here, and ask personal questions. And I could tell it was making these people's night. Well, it was also intoxicating to me. Okay. When I first got divorced, and most of my life, I loved attention no matter where it came from. Just loved it, couldn't get enough, especially when I was divorced, especially from women. I've shifted as I become more secure. I like attention from people that I want attention from. My love language, it used to be, by and large, words of affirmation. And I'm not saying that that's a bad one to have as a primary love language, but I was lacking in self-worth, and so I constantly needed to be affirmed. Well, that can be kind of exhausting, to have to constantly affirm me. But anyway, I was having an interesting experience with these people, and then we leave the concert and we go over to this Maverick, and it's clear across town, and there's like this probably 13-year-old girl that walks up to me, and she's like, you've been my hero since I was 9. And I saw her dad, and I looked over and I'm like, who's this guy with you? He said, oh, that's my dad. And I said, your dad's the real hero. Your dad's the one that raised you. Your dad's the one that is the real hero here. And it was a neat experience. And the dad got a little emotional, and, so I left. And then all of a sudden I got this idea. Hey, most of the people at this concert, they may go down to Gracie's or, one of these bars. So let's go there. And, my 2 buddies, and it was funny because they literally looked like security and they played the part. So they're walking with me on the side and people are doing stuff and I'm being, an idiot, but, good-hearted. But I thought, hey, let's go down to Gracie's and I'm going to sit in the back and you guys kind of talk like you're trying to keep me away from people. I'll kind of act like him and let's have some fun. And I caught it. My motivation shifted. It shifted from wanting to just, connect with people and to help people have a good night to wanting to use this to receive attention and honor. And in this situation, by impersonating someone that wasn't even me. Well, that type of attention was new to me. It was intoxicating. Attention from people that I didn't even know. And I realized how dangerous it was. And I had a new appreciation for people that receive that type of attention and stay humble and nice. And I had a new level of sympathy for people that fall because of that attention. But it was a fascinating experience for me to think back on, right? As I said at the first of this, my struggle is pride. Well, pride to me is and we can have pride in others, which I don't think is a bad thing. Competition is not always bad. If I see someone that's accomplished some great feat and I say, hey, if they can do it, I can do it, I think that's good, right? If you tell me I can't do something, we'll see. That can get me in trouble too, by the way, but I can be very, very competitive that way. But a while back, I did a little story for the Orem, Utah mission with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they highlighted a story I talked about, I've shared about. It's in one of my shorts and my story about an experience with ladybugs and my daughter. Well, a while later, I found myself one night, and I'm looking through this site. I'll post a link. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's a great Facebook page, but I start counting the views. And I'm sitting there counting them and looking how many I've got. And I see this person, this man and his wife. And his wife, I think, had Alzheimer's or dementia. And he was a better writer than I was, extremely articulate. And I think I had, at that point, maybe the second most views. He had double my views. And I remember it was bothering me. And all of a sudden I was like, what am I doing? I'm trying to help people and bring them to Christ. And this is a beautiful story that's probably going to affect a lot of people. And here I am caught up in competition and feeling threatened because he has more views than me. And, it was interesting, how that happened. This endeavor has been a interesting one for me, as I've talked to people. This thing has triggered every, what I would call, character defect or weakness that would have caused me to use drugs before. From ambitions, to pride, to depression, to letdowns, to highs, to lows. But there is an amazing, very strong temptation to judge the success of this endeavor based upon the predominant reception or even individual reception that people tell me, or especially the number of views that I get, right? And if I'm not careful, I can compartmentalize this and it can become a big problem, right? And early on it was difficult, right? And as you put stuff out there like this, I certainly am prone to, having feelings hurt and different things, or feel like I'm burying my soul and, getting different reactions from people who had different opinions there. But if I'm not careful, I start basing the success based upon views, right? And, why is this one not doing this? And then I start thinking about my content, and it shifts from my original intention to what I think is going to be the most popular, the most diversive, and get the most views. And then I see, these people some of these influencers that have gotten just millions of followers, and some of them are absolute wrecks. If I wanted to be funny, if I wanted to tease about people, if I wanted to make fun of my culture or whatever, I could get a lot more views. For my friends that know me very well, I certainly have that side, and it can come out. That's not why I decided to do this. It's not why I am doing it. I'm not trying to be popular here. I realize that my content is very divisive. I realize that I don't know everything. I realize that I can be wrong. I realize that I draw hard lines in the sand. And I realize that it's not going to make everyone happy. But I don't think that's possible. And if you're making everyone happy in your life, you're doing something wrong. I think a friend to all, to quote the wonderful Taylor Swift, is a friend to none. I do like that song. But it's been interesting to shut down that, because Satan is in my ear constantly, right? And, what performs, what doesn't, what do I need to tweak in order to get that? Well, I already have had assurances when I started this, through blessings from my bishop, different people. In fact, even doing this came from that. But so long as I do my best to stay humble, so long as I turn this over to God, and so long as I don't fall into transgression, this will affect people the way that it is meant to affect people. And for me, at my core, I truly only care what God thinks about this. And I know He's very proud of me. I know that. After that, your reaction is your reaction. I certainly hope that you like it and it makes you feel good and stuff. But I don't concern myself too much one or the other. And, it's severed some relationships I've had. And, that's sad to me, but it is what it is. And I've tried to be not too divisive and share how I feel, but understand how different people feel. But this idea that we're in competition will arise. I look on Facebook sometimes and someone will have a wonderfully articulated post that's designed to help, and I'll find myself trying to pick it apart. Be like, oh, that person's a narcissist. I'm going to find out, their intentions are obvious, and then I catch myself. What am I doing? What am I doing? Why do I have to be the only one that can do things? Why do I have to do all this, right? And even if they are a narcissist, if that specific content is going to help, right, then why am I being threatened? Pride at its core, and me saying I'm a prideful guy is me saying I'm an insecure guy. I certainly have my insecurities, right? When I'm threatened by someone else, I feel insecure, or by something or something else. And then my value shifts and I start to fixate on certain things where I normally don't derive my value from. I know a lot of people that do things somewhat similar to me, and they do good things. And I'm not in competition with them. I regularly are sending people that reach out to me to professionals to help. I'm not at this point wanting to do one-on-one work except for the volunteer I already do. And I realize I don't know everything. If you're out there and if you're trying to help people, we're on the same side. And as long as I'm meant to help who I'm meant to help, I'm happy with that. But it is a constant work to remind myself of that, because the world will tell me in order to be successful you have to do this, and you have to get the acclaim, and you have to do this, and this endeavor has to end, with whatever it is. Well, as long as we're in that frame of mind in comparison, it's a very miserable place to be, right? It's interesting as I've started to get out of this, the idea of what success has been just ingrained within us, in our culture. And I think it's shifting to an extent, right? We see different models with different body shapes, which I think is wonderful. As a man, I've had, a lot of questions. Do you prefer blondes or brunettes? And my answer is both. I literally don't have a preference there. I've dated some women that lift and are built like me, and I've dated some that are very curvy, and you know what? They were equally as attractive to me. Personality-wise, I certainly have a type, but when we start to think, hey, this is the epitome of success, right? And with women, you need to look like this person, and this is the woman who's getting all the attention. And so I've got to shift. I've got to look like her, dress like her, act like her, and then I'll get the same amount of attention. That's not always true. And sometimes we get attention or someone's getting attention, and the same thing happens with men, the type of attention that I don't want. I don't worry so much, a lot getting catcalled, and I certainly don't have to worry about people, or at least women, threatening me, which women have to deal with, which is a very sad thing, the way that they process and they understand fear. But my point is, I've heard people say that guy can have any guy he wants. Well, that's not true, because people want different things. They just do. My understanding of psychology and of personality disorders and different things would make me very effective if I chose to use it in a certain way with people that were traumatized in a certain way, because I would understand how to manipulate that, be what they want, and get a desired outcome. I don't do that. I know people who do that. And I already did an episode on that. You're not a stud, you're manipulating her trauma for gratification. I know women who do the same thing. But, this idea that this one size is just simply not true, right? It's interesting to me, this idea of not caring. My buddy had told me a while back, years back, Gabe Beckstead, he's actually coming on next week, one of my best friends, but the idea of he who cares less wins. And I thought a lot about that, right? And we were talking about women. Well, when I was selling pest control, when I was a younger guy, right, I always have so much anxiety with wanting to get that first sale of the day. You know what I mean? As soon as I got the first sale, I could calm down a little bit because at least I was making money today. Towards the end of my career, I really hardly ever didn't get a sale, but early on it certainly happened, and that meant I knocked 7 or 8 doors in the southern United States in the blistering heat, not making any money. Well, sometimes I would have 4 or 5 sales and it would be 5 o'clock, right? And then all of a sudden it would seem like the neighborhood I was knocking in was just fire. And I would have like 9 or 10 when I went home and everyone was just signing up. And I just thought, man, that turned out to be a really good area. Well, what happened was at around 4 or 5 sales, I was good for the rest of the day. I was happy and I was content. And when I knocked on someone's door, it was basically, hey, if you want to sign up, it's a good deal, but I'm good. That was attractive to people. I wasn't pressuring, I wasn't pushing, I was already happy, and as a psychological consequence, they signed up. Well, that can definitely work in our favor with dating if we're happy where we're at, which is not easy to do. I'll never be completely happy as a single man unless God has it in his plan for me to be single forever. Well, he's let me know that that's not in my plan, thank God. But if it was, I would be happy that way, because my faith in God is that I would be happier alone than not. But when it comes to being happy and not carrying I think it can be healthy and not healthy, right? So if you're constantly drawn after someone that you can't have, I don't think that's always healthy, But I understand there's a pride element there, right? Someone who gets a lot of attention all the time, you don't show them attention. And, they probably don't love the attention all the time, but they're kind of addicted to it. And then you're going to kind of stand out as, why is this one not giving me attention? Or, treat them certain ways. And this is a manipulation, right? But it can appeal to a certain type of person that their value is in how much attention they get, and all of a sudden they're not getting it and you're not doing it, and then you become a conquest because they want their worth based upon you getting that attention. Well, I think that's not the healthiest way. If someone's not interested in me, it doesn't hurt me, it doesn't make me upset, it doesn't make me mad. If we date for a while and I gain feelings and then they're not interested, that does hurt, and that's supposed to hurt. But I'm usually grateful. Someone who plays hard to get is too hard for me to get, right? I'm too old and tired and busy to play games anymore, but I understand them, right? But if you're chasing after, stuff you can't have, there's probably some work there that I would recommend doing, right? I want someone I can have. I want someone I feel secure with that way. So, when I was in Huntington Beach at a singles conference, I talked about this, but these guys they're talking about their interactions with women. Did I say the wrong thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Did I talk too much, too little? And I'm like, I give my opinion, right, on different things, but I'm like, and again, we're there at a faith conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so, we have faith that God runs the show, at least to certain degrees, right? And, my answer was, do you think that something so trivial as saying the wrong thing or talking too much would have so much power as to alter something of such eternal significance as who you're going to end up with? I don't think you have that power. I don't stress too much about that. That doesn't negate the fact that I have to polish my skills and do all that stuff, because that's going to make me, attractive for the right person. But at the same time, my faith is in God when it comes to that. And so it helps in that aspect of, I don't care, because what's mine is going to be mine, right? But my insecurities certainly manifest, right? David Foster Wallace did a commencement speech back, and he was a prolific speaker. And he spoke at this white-collar college, and you can find it on YouTube. It's called What is Water? And it's one of the best things I've ever heard, especially on mindfulness. But he talks about the idea of worshiping. And he says, we all worship. we all worship in some way or form, but he's like, one of the reasons that I would recommend worshiping Jesus Christ or God or the Four Noble Truths or whatever is that type of worship typically won't tear you apart. But the other type does, you know. Worship your body and you'll never feel attractive. And you'll constantly be fixated on something that's wrong with it. And then as you get older and you know, age starts to take that part of your beauty as it always does, you're going to die 1,000 deaths. I've certainly experienced that. Lifting weights is fun to an extent, but man, I get cut and I try on my shirts and I'm like, oh, this is I'm not big enough. And then I get big enough and I'm bigger, but then I get this little bit of skin, you know, my love handle. I'm like, I hate that. And so it's like a never-ending series of discontent. Well, to a healthy measure, it's fun because I constantly am trying to tweak things and change things because I just enjoy it. But if I start to fixate on what I look like and then I start to compare what other people look like compared to me, I become pretty miserable. You know, last month, I don't even want to tell you how much money I spent on clothes. Well, it was emotional numbing. You know, I still am an addict, and it wasn't horrific, but it was definitely excessive. I rekindled my Jordan collection. You know, I blame some of this on my great friend Seth for telling me about this website. I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to be responsible if you collect them, where I can find whatever Nikes or whatever from whatever year. So I spent quite a bit of money on it, but I was numbing. But I was talking to my therapist and he's like, imagine if you reach a point where you don't have to just be dressed to the max every second. I thought about it, right? And part of the numbing of spending is it creates dopamine, right? When we buy something. But there was this image that, you know, was getting out of hand. I need to look a certain way or act a certain way, or, you know, my worth was starting to shift into what I look like. You know, the same thing with money, right? The love of money in the Bible, it says, is the root of all evil. In the movie Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, which is the sequel, Josh Brolin and Sheila Beef are in I like the money. It's about the 2008 crash of the housing market, right? But he asks Josh Brolin, who's a billionaire, right? And he's an understudy, how much money would you need to have to where you would say, it's enough? And he looked at him and said, more. More. There's money and there's the love of money. Why more? It's not about the money. It's not what he can buy. It's about being better than the others. And that's the seductive part of more, right? That's what I talked about with my opinion is the things of this world are sexy and nice, but they'll lose their value and not be as fun to play with unless they can continue to help us want to achieve more. And, you know, as you get money, it can ruin you and drive in obsessions here. There's so much crap out there about become rich, get rich. You've got to be rich in order to do that. Well, money can be a wonderful thing, but it can be a very dangerous thing, very dangerous. You know, in my rehabs, I was surprised half the people that are in there are people that were raised in privilege and have a lot of money. And they still suffered with a lot of money. They're in rehab, right? So it has its own pitfalls, but my definition of success is not money. And it's like I said, it's not that impressive. I like money. I would like to have it. If you want to give me some, I'd be happy to spend it. But when I start to shift that way, right, my value comes from that, it becomes a problem. You know, so whenever I get in this stage where I start to feel insecure, when I start to, I realize my value has shifted, something has shifted, right? If I'm fixated on certain part of my looks, then I've shifted from where I should derive my value to what I look like. If I've shifted on possessions, then my value shifted, and it typically is because I've seen someone or someone said something or done something that's kind of knocked me off kilter and made me not derive my worth from where my worth is. Well, my divine worth, no one can take from me. My divine worth comes from an understanding of my eternal identity. And the neat thing is we all have the same identity. We are all literal sons and daughters of the eternal God. And nothing can take that away. And He loves us more than all the possessions, creations, and everything. And He doesn't love one of us more than the other, no matter what we look like, what race we are, what religion we are. He loves us all the same. Well, that's a reason to have some self-worth. I've learned that no interactions are trivial if I view people under that scope. I'm talking to someone who has always existed and will always exist as a literal child of God. And, my dad taught me to respect and honor that and try to find value and meaning in interactions with people. Elder Gong, apostle for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, spoke at that Huntington Beach conference, and he said something fascinating. He said, when you meet someone, try to find out what's remarkable about them. And you'll begin to see them as God sees them. Because there's something remarkable about everyone. And when we're looking for something that is remarkable about that person, we're not looking what we envy about that person. We're not thrown into a prideful or a competitive state. And we start to, see people as God sees them. Another reason I think that can center you in your self-worth is if you want to love yourself and do things that are lovable. I do love myself because by and large, I do things that are love-worthy. I do things that if I met someone else that did the same things, I would love them. And as a beautiful consequence, I don't engage in a lot of behavior that hurts me anymore because I don't want to hurt myself. Just like I don't want to hurt people in general, but especially people that are just good people, right? So when I start getting caught up in that comparison game, I start to remind myself, I'm not in competition with them. I am in competition with myself. And I think I'm a pretty formidable adversary. I do take a lot of motivation from others' accomplishments and the fact that like I said, if they do it, I can do it. But the moment that I want to accomplish it or be better than them, if that's your motivation, I know a guy that tells me pride can lead you to do great things, but if this type of pride, competitive pride, you're never going to be satisfied because then you're going to find someone else. And guess what? There's always someone better looking. There's always someone smarter. There's always someone more articulate. There is always someone, or at least your mind will tell you that. I try my best to compete with myself. Well, that hasn't always been the case. I probably hold the record in this single world about being invited and uninvited to more parties than anyone I know, right? And it used to hurt my feelings, and I kept tally. If you crossed me, I kept tally. And, I would get mine back one way or the other, right? And I hate that. I hate that about me. I also understand that my brain as an addict looks for resentments. I look for reasons that I think people have wronged me, because if you've wronged me, then I can go and engage in destructive behavior, and it's not my fault, it's your fault for treating me bad, and then I'm not conflicted in this destructive behavior, and then it becomes very dangerous because it feels very good and it's very addictive. And so my brain naturally, if I don't watch it, will gravitate towards resentments, but understanding that, hey, I'm just competing with myself, and I'm a son of God. And when someone else's value is increased, mine is not diminished. It's not diminished, And I do pray for humility regularly. I pray for a lot of things, and when you pray for humility, it's like praying for patience. But when I'm in a state of pride and comparison, I am in a state of insecurity and inadequacy. I'm at my best, I'm the most confident when I'm in a state of humility. Because when I'm in a state of humility, I understand that I'm not running the show. The creator of heaven and earth and everything else who is my literal Father. And I can have all the confidence in the world. And I don't need to be better than anyone. I don't need to compete with anyone. I just need to cover whatever my scope of influence is meant to be and fulfill my potential, and I'm in a good place. It's a constant challenge, but it's something that certainly is worth working for, right? If you didn't invite me to a party, or if you did something I felt was there, the old me, and I apologize if I've ever done this, and I have certainly let my ego get to me with people, especially with men, and my sincere apologies. But if someone did something, and a lot of time these guys wouldn't invite me to these parties, well, why wouldn't they? Because I would sit there and flirt with everyone and go and dance like an idiot and just, try and get attention from everyone. Well, I can certainly understand that, right? But if they didn't invite me, next time I saw them with a girl, I was going to hit on their girl, right? And a lot of time I wasn't even interested in the girl, but it was just, hey, I want you to know, if I want her, I can have her. Well, first of all, that was a lot of the time not true at all. I couldn't have got them from her. But I hated that. I hated that part of me. And there still is a part of me inside of me that wants to compare, that wants to compete. And the best way I know is to try and, remind myself that no person can take from me what is mine. This fear of being judged I find fascinating, but I could care less. If people judge me, if they don't understand my motives, this and that, right? I think if someone said, well, I heard something about you now, I probably would say, well, that's true, but it's a lot worse. So, a lot worse. So if you got a half hour, let's really tell you everything that I did, right? I think I pretty much say everything I do on these episodes anyway, right? But I just don't care. I don't care anymore, but there's an understanding there. I do not fear man anymore. Because man and, to a greater extent, the son of the morning, Satan himself, have only so much power over me. Satan has a certain amount of power allotted him to bruise my heel. Well, so long as I'm doing the things that I need to do with God, that's all he has. And through the power of Christ, I crush his head. I don't want to give him any more power than I have. Well, people's actions still affect me negatively. A lot, right? And they can hurt my feelings, physical threats, all kinds of different things. They're not fun. But if I didn't cause it, or if there's a lie spread about me and it's not true, it holds no power unless I give it legs. I love two examples of my Savior. One, talking with Herod, right? They brought him to him to be judged. He didn't answer him a word. Not one. He's hit with all these false accusations. It didn't even dignify a response. That's how I try to handle these situations that are untrue now. And I certainly have things said, and people just talk, and I know, and it doesn't even bother me anymore. Most of the time, it's not even worth a response. It's not worth a response. If you give it legs, if you give it a response, it's going to be a lot bigger thing. The hardest person to fight is the one that won't fight back. There is a time and place to fight, but it's rare. For the most part, you don't fight back. The person's eventually, no matter what the situation is, going to lose interest in fighting with you. The other thing that I think is so powerful is when Christ is meeting with Pontius Pilate, and he did not want to kill Christ. His wife had a dream. Don't kill this man. I've suffered these horrible things. He obviously could tell that there's something very different about the Son of God. But he's received huge pressure from the Jewish population. And, the emperor's charged him to try and keep the peace as much as possible, which is not easy to do when you're enslaving and domineering an entire civilization. And at one point, he's pleading to Christ, just help me, answer me, because Christ wasn't answering him. Don't you understand that I have the power to deliver you? And the Savior of mankind looks at him and says, you have no power over me save that which is given you from heaven. Talk about power. Talk about what it would have been like to be Pilate in that moment. It would have been terrifying. well, I'm not Jesus Christ, but I am blessed with his power, and no one can take from me what is mine. I can take it from me. I don't compete with other men when it comes to women, because the only person that can affect that situation is me. If someone likes someone else, they're not meant for me. So I'm not in competition. I'm not worried about that. I don't believe I have the power, unless I fell into just horrendous transgression, to really alter that state when it comes to that. I know some people who, liked someone, and maybe their value system was that they wanted to wait till they were married to have sex, and they ended up sleeping with the person and it didn't work out, and their whole life has been horrible ever since. This regret that, hey, I lost my chance, the one I love, because I failed. Wow. The God I believe in, because of a common human weakness, is not going to change your destiny and your circumstance. I believe I have the power to delay God's blessings to me based upon my conduct, and certainly to cause additional suffering. But in the end, I think that he's going to give me what's meant to be mine. Well, at this point in my life, I don't want to delay stuff. I try to limit the self-inflicted stuff. I hate to be stirred up to remembrance, as the scriptures talk about. And I'm not perfect, and it happens, but on a much lesser level. But my confidence, and where I don't compete, is an understanding that I don't have to be what everyone else is. What is meant for me will be mine. Well, me, as a religious person, as a Christian, that means getting as close to my Savior as possible, working on myself, having patience, and just getting myself to the right situation, to where I attract the person I want, or I have the right opportunities that I want professionally, or I want the blessings or protections, and that's about all I can do. And it's a wonderful way to live. It's my biggest argument for a belief in a supreme being, because, man, it takes things away. And when I look at things like that, the element of competition is gone and pride disappears. In the end, I talk about these voices, right, of what we need to be. I know certain, they call themselves life coaches or influencers in the state, and their whole message they think is novel. Well, it's let's find the fearful. Let's get them to fear about things they can't control, which in turn makes them angry and mad, which anger is a secondary emotion to fear. So in the moment, they don't feel fear, they feel empowered. And eventually they'll feel fear again, but let's just continue on this cycle, and let's take advantage of that and make a lot of money. Well, that's not a new formula. Make as much money as you can. Get as much women as you can. Get gain, as the scriptures call it. Well, when people are on their deathbed, I don't think anyone really says, I'm glad I had all that money. I'm glad I, slept with that many people, or this or that. At that point, we probably think about what matters most. I've had a few near-death experiences. I don't want any more, but a couple ones where I thought for sure I was dead, and it was fascinating to where my mind went to. And at that time, I did have regret. And the regret was always, I wish I would have taken advantage of the time I had and spent more time with the people I love. And today, I do that. And if I was to go, there would be no regrets, and that's a great feeling. In the end, with all these examples and all these comparisons, for me, my hero is the Son of God. The Son of Man hath no place to lay his head. Foxes have holes and dens. He is despised and rejected of men. Most people didn't listen to him. His very people crucified him. He wasn't out talking about possessions. He didn't have any. He wasn't out bragging about popularity. He was incredibly divisive. He was sharing the message, the most important message that will ever be shared, and partly receiving immense joy from a small but passionate following, and being resented, turned on, betrayed, and eventually crucified for it. He's the ultimate man. What manner of man ought ye to be? Christ says, even as I am. That's my personal recipe for handling this pride, this competitiveness that tries to drive this. I'm going to try to be like him. Certainly we'll never be able to match or surpass him, but I'm going to be able to try and be like him. In the end, we're in this together, learning that, hey, what's yours is yours, and learning to be happy for others, and be happy for others' accomplishments and not letting it affect us or our worth. Hopefully this lesson has helped. Pride is dangerous. It affects us all. That's why Satan fell. He wanted God's glory. He didn't just want the glory promised to all of us, which surpasses all understanding. He wanted more than the Father. Competition, pride. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope everyone has happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and thanks for tuning in.